You know, I've been thinking of doing a match review for the simulated match that MLS tends to do and kind of use as a substitution of the actual match that is supposed to be taking place right now. And the reason why I haven't think about doing a match review of all the simulated match that MLS have done is because all the simulated match, they don't actually provide you highlights of what happened in this match, and that they only provide you the score and the goal scored of each of these match. But the other issue that I have with all these simulated match is that there are two teams that is not going to be featured in the simulated match, and those two teams are the expansion team in Inter Miami and Nashville, because FIFA 20 is not updated into the latest 2020 MLS season. It still acts as if MLS is in the 2019 season, and those two teams weren't in MLS in the 2019 MLS season. But that being said, I also said that it just gets to a point where I might actually do a match review of these simulated match when I'm that desperate. And even though I'm not desperate in terms of running out of content to talk about on my channel, I'm kind of desperate in terms of actually go and do a match review and preview video, because a match review and preview video has been some of the favorite video that I get to do on this channel besides the Sports Hop series episode. And because of the fact that MLS is being suspended and there's no actual game that is taking place, I do dearly miss doing match preview and review video. So that being said, I am actually going to do a match review of all 11 games that was simulated of what was supposed to be, I believe, match week number 6. And I kind of started doing that last week when I kind of included that in the news of the week, because there was only 3 games happening on that week. And that week was supposed to be the international break, and that during the international break, while MLS still has games that is taking place, they usually don't have like a full slate 11 or 13 game action that will happen on that week. But in this case, we will have a full 11 game slate action, and the reason why there's 11 instead of 13 is because of those two teams that I mentioned, Inter Miami and Nashville, that was supposed to play against one of the MLS team, but since again they're not in the FIFA 20 game, I can't really talk about them and also talk about their matches that was involved. But either way, let us begin in terms of talk about the first game, which was Columbus and TFC, and Toronto with a 4-1 win against Columbus. And this was really the Jozy Altidore and Alejandro Pozuelo show, because both of these players were able to get a brace and pretty much combine each other with 4 goals for TFC in this game. Altidore, of course, scored in the 18th minute to give TFC a 1-0 lead, then followed by Pozuelo in the 38th minute. Jerzy Zardes did try to make things interesting and trying to give Columbus some hope by getting a goal back, but Jozy Altidore immediately restored that 2-goal lead that TFC had heading into halftime to make it 3-1, and Pozuelo basically put the icing on the cake on a wonderful free kick to give TFC the 4th goal and give Toronto a 4-1 win against Columbus. And Toronto, this was definitely an impressive role performance that they have, and especially playing a Columbus team that this year has been considered one of the dark horse and have got off to a great start to the season. This was definitely impressive, the way that they were able to go on the road and put up such a dominant performance. But moving on, in terms of the next match, is Chicago and the Redbulls. And boy, this was a very exciting game. And the first 2 games, there was actually a lot of goals that feature. And this game between the Fire and the Redbulls saw 6 goals, and Chicago winning 4-2. Although I'm pretty sure Fire fans were pretty much holding their breath in this game throughout the entire game, because they had a quick 2-0 lead to start this game, with Robert Beric scoring in the 6th minute and Alvaro Madron in the 22nd minute. But then in the second half, the wheels basically come off on them, and the Redbulls started to come back into this one, with Brian White scoring in the 49th minute. Then Floro Valette tying the game at at 2 apiece in the 66th minute, and the Redbulls looked like they had all the momentum. But CJ Sapon would retake the lead for Chicago in the 75th minute. Then he basically shut the door on the Redbulls in the 87th minute. And in the end, the Fire, of course, were able to hold on to a 4-2 win. And that, as I mentioned, how Fire fans were holding their breath in this game, they also feel like this was a roller coaster ride, because there was some very high moment of the Chicago Fire looking to just completely dominate against the Redbulls, to a point where, yeah, what the heck is going on? How did we throw away a 2-0 lead in a span of just 17 minutes? To then CJ Sapon basically rescue the team and able to restore those 2-goal lead that they got in halftime. So yeah, it's a good victory for the Chicago Fire. And as for the Redbulls, their struggle in the early part of the season continue, and that this has got to be frustrated. The fact that it looked like for sure that they had all the momentum and potentially the one that was going to get all 3 points on the road after they tied the game up at 2 apiece, only to concede 2 goals late in the game to lose this one 4-2. Speaking of a New York team, the other New York team, NYCFC, is also struggling this season. In fact, the other New York team, NYCFC, is actually in the bottom of the Eastern Conference if you do not include Inter Miami or Nashville, that is in the bottom of each conference, because they haven't been able to play any of the games during the simulated match. And by the way, when I do switch the boards and look at the last 3 games from this weekend simulated match, I will show you the table of where each team stands, and there is definitely a lot of surprise in terms of where each team stands on the table. But for NYCFC, they're dead last in the table coming into this week, and after this week, they're still dead last at the end of the table. And this week, they found a new way to lose game, which is scoring an unfortunate own goal that caused them to lose this game. But first of all, Ola Kamara scored the early goal for DC to give them a 1-0 lead. Tajiri Shradi then tied it up at 1 apiece in the 55th minute. And then in the 63rd minute, that was when the own goal happened. And I'll tell you what, it is not very often you see, like, own goals, while it happens a lot during actual matches that is taking place, it doesn't actually happen a lot in terms of simulated matches. And I don't know what exactly Maxime Chanot was thinking here, but when the cross was coming into this, for whatever reason, he decided to head it into his own goal. I mean, it felt like he almost forgot that he was actually a defender, and that he's actually trying to head that one out instead of heading it into his own net. I mean, it was a great finish by him, but he's got to remember that he's playing for NYCFC right now, not DC United. So, yeah, that was very unfortunate, and that unfortunately turns out to be the winning goal for DC United, as once again they were able to walk out with all 3 points despite the fact that they didn't look impressive in this game. And as for NYCFC, yeah, the struggles just continue, and you wonder if Ronnie Delia is going to be under a lot of heat, and that he's probably even feeling the pressure that he could potentially be the first coach that gets fired from this season. But moving on, in terms of the next match, is LAFC. They won 2-1 against Dallas. Rossi was pretty much the difference for LAFC in terms of getting all 3 points, as he was able to score in the 43rd minute and 55th minute. Jesus Ferreira did give Dallas the equalizer in the 51st minute and potentially hope that they could get something out of it against the defending Supporters Shield champ. But Diego Rossi, as I mentioned, that scored a brace and pretty much was the difference in this game, scored his second goal in the 55th minute, as LAFC with a comfortable 2-1 victory against Dallas, and they continue to try to rise up the table to try to retake that first position. I mean, right now, as I of course will show you at the end of the video in terms of the table, I believe LAFC is currently 5th in the standing, which is definitely not the place you would think LAFC would be at any part of the season. But keep in mind, there are a couple teams that is only playing like like 4 games this season compared to some teams that play 6 games. So yeah, there are some game in hand that a couple of these teams might be in the lower part of the table, but if they can of course win those game in hand, they would be near the top of the table. And that, I believe, LAFC, if they can win their game in hand, they will retake the top spot in the Western Conference. But moving on, in terms of the next match, is probably the biggest surprising match of this week, which is FC Cincinnati getting their first win of the season against Atlanta, as they were able to win 3-1 against Atlanta United. And even though Atlanta did not have Joseph Martinez in this game, it was still kind of surprising, the fact that FC Cincinnati was able to pull off such an impressive victory. And they start the scoring in the 18th minute when CM Dion scored his first ever goal for FC Cincinnati and in MLS to give Cincinnati a 1-0 lead. Pity Martinez did equalize in the 37th minute to tie the game up. And at that point, you would think, well, Atlanta is probably going to run away with this one and start getting that second goal and just get another victory out of Cincinnati. No, that is exactly not what happened, because in the second half, it would be the Jurgen Locadia show, with him scoring in the 67th minute, then scoring in the 84th minute to pretty much put this game away, as FC Cincinnati was with a very surprising victory against Atlanta and also getting their first win of the season. And yeah, I mean, you know, I don't think a lot of people saw this one coming, with FC Cincinnati able to pull off a victory against an Atlanta side that, again, even though they don't have Joseph Martinez, this is still an Atlanta side that is doing pretty well in the beginning part of their season. But moving on, in terms of the next match, one team that is not having a great season is the Portland Timbers. And right now, not only the Timbers are struggling at home, but it seems like they are struggling on the road too. And if that is going to be the case for the rest of the season, yeah, the Timbers could be in deep trouble. And you know how I mentioned Ronnie Delia could potentially be the first head coach to be fired, and that he is definitely on the hot seat, knowing the fact that NYCFC is dead last right now in the Eastern Conference. Giovanni Savarese is another guy that should also feel the heat and probably are on the hot seat too, because he has not taken this Timbers team the way that many people thought they would be. And in this game, they of course lost 3-0 against the Dynamo. Mauro Manotas opening the scoring in the 10th minute, then score again in the 21st minute to give Houston a 2-0 lead, and that would be the score as they head to halftime. Then Darwin Quintero would score the third goal for the Dynamo, as the Dynamo with a 3-0 win against Portland. I believe this might be the first victory that the Houston Dynamo has got during this season. So I guess if you were a team that was searching for your first victory, this is definitely the week for you to do. But as for the Timbers, like I said, this is definitely not a great resort whatsoever. And unless if this team cannot turn it around in terms of just, I wouldn't say that they should focus on their road form, but if they cannot turn around their home form, they could be in serious jeopardy of not only not even making the playoffs, but could be bottom dweller in this season. Because if you are a team that cannot win at home or cannot win on the road, then you are most likely going to be basement dweller. And I'm pretty sure the Timbers, especially their fan base, will not accept the fact that this team can finish the season in the bottom of the Western Conference. But moving on, in terms of the next match, is the Galaxy. So the Galaxy did something that they rarely do, which is keep a clean sheet, as they were able to win 1-0 against Sporting KC. The only goal came in the 8th minute when Jonathan Dos Santos was able to score a screamer to give the Galaxy a 1-0 lead. And, you know, despite the fact that Sporting KC had a lot of chances in this game, somehow, in some way, that Galaxy defense for once actually showed up and stopped a couple of decent chances that SKC had. And SKC also had some unfortunate situation where they hit the post a couple of times. And also, remember how I said in the last episode that Sporting KC lost their first game of the season? Yeah, that was not true, and that they actually have been struggling ever since they got off to a great start to the season and getting their first 2 win of the season, which kind of begs me the question, is when Sporting KC were looking like a dominant team in the first 2 games of the season, is it because the fact that they were playing some easy team? I mean, they were playing Houston and Vancouver to start off the season, and both of those teams are probably going to be finished near the bottom of the Western Conference. But now, the fact that they're playing against some more tougher team like the Galaxy that is in the middle part of the table, or they start getting found out, and that they might not be as good as we thought they were in the beginning of the season. But either way, you know, if you're the Galaxy, you're definitely going to be happy with this result, and also happy the fact that your defense actually showed up for once and got a rare clean sheet this season. Speaking of clean sheet, Minnesota also got a clean sheet against another struggling team in the Western Conference, that is the San Jose Earthquakes. And by the way, Minnesota actually did a stream of this match where I think one of their esports player actually gone up against the San Jose Earthquakes, although I think that esports player was actually playing a computer player, because Minnesota absolutely destroyed the Quakes in that match, and that I think it was the final score of that game was 7-1. And usually when that happens, this probably tells me that, yeah, they probably just did that on purpose, because they want to make even the first meeting between both of these teams even more dominant and just even more one-sided than it has to be. But I'm gonna go with the actual simulation match that happened, and not the one that they decided to stream and decided to just run up the score against the Quakes in this game. But even in the simulated match, the Loons was able to get a 2-0 win against the Quakes. Luis Amarilla continue his 25-goal campaign with another goal in the 12th minute. Then Ozzy Alonso scored a rare goal in the 34th minute, and this was actually not a banger that he scored. Like, anytime when Ozzy Alonso get on the score sheet, you would think it would be an incredible goal that he scored, but this was just kind of a little tap in that he was able to score after I believe it was Jan Gregush basically feeds it into the middle, and Alonso was able to tap it in. And I was kind of shocked that Ozzy Alonso was right there in the middle. I mean, I thought for a second that might have been either Luis Amarilla or Kevin Molino, but that was Ozzy Alonso, and it's quite surprising that he was not only so out of position, but actually was there to be in the receiving end of a center ball into the middle of the box. But either way, that gave Minnesota the 2-0 lead, and that would be the final score of this game, as the Loons, I believe they remain at the top of the Western Conference right now, while the Quakes are in the bottom of the Western Conference. Yeah, so much for all the optimism of the Quakes potentially might get into the playoffs this season, because, yeah, this season has been a huge disappointment, and I won't be surprised if there's going to be something similar to what I saw in 2018, where fans are going to be very restless in terms of the front office and the coaching staff, and that, you know, Almeida might be another one of those coaches that could be on the hot seat if that is the case. And that's kind of unfortunate too, because I really don't think this is Almeida the fault. Well, at least I don't think the full responsibility of him turning the Quakes team back to a laughing stock like they were in 2018 is fully his fault, because he hasn't really been getting a lot of support, and that, you know, the Quakes, knowing the fact that this season they need to upgrade in terms of the position, and that they didn't do exactly that, we are seeing why that is the case. And while other teams have already upgraded their position and have made some big signing, while the Quakes are kind of stand put, yeah, we are clearly showing what I thought was probably going to happen this season, where the fact that the Quakes decide not to spend or not to upgrade their team while other teams have done the same thing is going to be a huge problem with this team, and that you're going to see this team lose a lot of games. And we're seeing it right now as they're sitting near the foot of the Western Conference, or actually on the foot of the Western Conference if you don't include Nashville SC in the table. But that being said, I am now going to be switching the boards and look at the last 3 games from this week simulation action, and also look at the table and look at where each team stands in the table. But yeah, moving on is the Rapids. So the Rapids continued their incredible season by going to New England and getting all 3 points on the road as they won 2-0 against the Revolution. The 2 goals came from Kai Kamara, and would you believe that those 2 goals were actually coming from a set piece? Well, actually, the second goal was from a set piece, although the first one looked like it was from a set piece where one of the Rapids player, which I believe was Jack Price, lofted a ball into the box, and Kai Kamara, as he always does, jumped the highest to head that one in to give the Rapids a 1-0 lead. Then Jack Price would serve a perfect corner, because he's the king in terms of serving a perfect corner that allowed Kai Kamara once again to jump up over everybody and head that one into the back of the net. And yeah, the Rapids, another victory in this game, and another game where they were able to win because of the set piece and the heading goal that they have been scoring. And for all those people that thought that they cannot keep up those set piece goal that they scored last year, yeah, they are proving everybody wrong, and that they continue to look like what they were last season, which you know, especially in the second half of the season, where they were just one of the hottest team in the league. And that this season, most likely, if they can continue this run that they're on, they're going to definitely make the playoffs. But moving on in terms of the next match, and speaking of another team that will probably make the playoffs, is Orlando City. And Orlando City, I think this could finally be the year where they actually they might actually break this drought, and that they continue their strong start of the season by winning 4-2 against Montreal. Nani got the goal scoring in the 20th minute. Lappinainen did tie it up in the 50th minute, just 5 minutes into the second half, and it looked like maybe Montreal would have some momentum in this game. But instead, Orlando City went on a goal scoring spree that started in the 63rd minute when Junior Urso scores to give Orlando City the lead back. Then 10 minutes later, Benji Michel would make it 3-1 in favor of Orlando City. And then Oro Roussel, who has not scored in what it seemed like forever, was able to get on the score sheet in the 85th minute to make it 4-1 in favor of Orlando City. The Impact did get one back and got a consolation in stoppage time from Sofia Taidir, but Orlando City completely overpowered Montreal in this game. And like I said, could this actually be finally the year that Orlando City is doing? Because if you look at the table right now, which I will mention after I finish talk about the last game of the simulating action from match week number 5, they're near the top of the table. And I don't want to jinx any Orlando City fans that they probably will make the playoffs, because we've seen this before where Orlando City get off to a strong start, and then once May or June hits, that's when the wheels just come off for them. So we shall see whether or not if they can continue this good run, and that they can continue to be near the top of the Eastern Conference. But moving on in terms of the next match, speaking of top of the conference, RSL is another team that is near the top of their own conference, and I believe they're now tied with Minnesota in terms of that top spot in the Western Conference after getting a 1-0 win against the Vancouver Whitecaps. The only goal in this game was Nick Beasler that scored in the 22nd minute. But yeah, RSL, as I said, they continue their charge up the top of the Western Conference, while Vancouver, predictably, they are near the bottom of the Western Conference, and they're actually tied with the Quakes in terms of that last spot in the Western Conference. But with all that preview pretty much all done and dusted, or I shouldn't say preview, I meant review, that I've done in terms of all 11 games of this simulated action from match week number 5. Let's take a look at the table of each conference, and let's take a look at how each team stands after 5 weeks of MLS action. And we start off in the Eastern Conference, where there is a three-way tie for first place with the Union, Orlando City, and Atlanta United all tied up at 10 points, but Philly and Atlanta does have a game in hand over Orlando City. So technically, Orlando City should actually be in third place, and that Atlanta should be they actually should be in second place right now. But when I look on the standings, I actually got this from the MLS League website, and I don't think they factor in terms. I think they probably factor in terms of total wins in a game, but I don't think they factor in that some of these teams actually have played less game, and that they didn't actually use the points per average to determine what's the standing of each of these conferences. But as of now, there is a freeway tie for the Eastern Conference with the Union, Orlando City, and Atlanta United all tied up with 10 points apiece. Then we got TFC with 8 points, but they have played some of the fewest game in their own conference, and if they can win a couple of their game in hand, they might be right up there in the top of the Eastern Conference, followed by DC United with 7 points right now, and then there is a two-way tie for the last two spot of the Eastern Conference, and it's actually FC Cincinnati and the Chicago Fire that is tied with the last two spot, and that FC Cincinnati kind of is in a very similar situation where they were in last year, where they were kind of in the playoffs spot early in the season before they head into a nosedive, and right now they are kind of in that same situation, but let's hope that will not be the case where they just took a nosedive and that they're going to just not even be in the conversation of making the playoffs near the end of the year. Then we look at teams that is below the red line, which is Montreal, who also have 5 points, and they also have a game in hand over the 3 teams or over the 2 teams that is above them that tie with 5 points right now in the Eastern Conference. So if they can win that game in hand, they could go above the red line. It can leapfrog Chicago and FC Cincinnati in terms of that spot. Then we got the Redbulls, New England, and Columbus all tied up at 4 points apiece. And you know how earlier I said Columbus, they were having a great season? Yeah, they were actually not having a great season, and I made that same mistake I did last week when I was talking about how Sporting KC, they were having a great season and they lost their first game in a row. Turns out they had a great season in the first two match of the season, but then it just went all downhill after that. So yeah, that's pretty much the same case for Columbus as they sit near the bottom of the Eastern Conference, although they're also one of those teams that only have played 4 games and that they do have games in hand where they can actually get higher in the table. I mean, the Eastern Conference is pretty tight in terms of the standings, and that, actually, since we are very early in the season, you're going to expect a lot of team that is kind of like jumble up, and there's really not much point that separate between the top of the standing and the bottom of the standing. So if either of these teams gets hot, or if either of these teams start to get cold, especially near the top of the table, they could really take a tumble in terms of the table right now. Now, in the Western Conference, we have Minnesota and RSL currently tied with 11 points. Minnesota obviously have a game in hand over RSL right now, so they could even extend that advantage. But they also have to deal with the Sounders, who also have a game in hand over Minnesota and currently have 10 points alongside with the Rapids and LAFC. And again, even though LAFC is very low in the standings and people feel like they probably should be near the top instead of near the middle part of the table, if they can win those 2 games in hand, they could really find themselves near the top of the Western Conference alongside with the Seattle Sounders. Then we got the Galaxy and FC Dallas currently tied at 6th place with 7 points apiece, but the Galaxy does have a game in hand over Dallas, and like their hated neighbor LAFC, they have played only 4 games and played some of the fewest games in the Western Conference. Then below the red line, we have SKC and Portland, both played the most game in its conference and have 6 points apiece. So I have a feeling none of these teams are going to probably get above the table, unless if some of the team above them are starting to struggle because they have played some of the most games, and some of the team above them actually have at least a game in hand over them. Then we got the Dynamo with 5 points apiece after playing 5 games. And then at the bottom, we got the Vancouver Whitecaps and the Quakes with 4 points apiece. And I guess if you look at the table and you kind of compare both of the table, the Western Conference look a little bit more realistic than it is in the Eastern Conference. Like, I don't think a lot of people would feel like Orlando City would be right up there, and teams like FC Cincinnati and the Chicago Fire would be right there in the Eastern Conference table. Whereas in the Western Conference, you know, Minnesota, they got off to a great start and they continue that good form that they had in the beginning of the season. And then you also have Seattle, Colorado, and LAFC is really challenging for those top spot with the games in hand. And if you look at the teams that is below the red line, I think besides maybe SKC and Portland, the bottom 3 team, you would probably think that they would be right where they were heading into the season. So I think the Western Conference is a little bit more realistic in terms of the table-wise in the simulation matchup compared to what the table could look like in real life. But yeah, you know, we're just in the early part of the season. There's still a lot left in terms of the season, and hopefully once this whole coronavirus outbreak is over, we don't even have to worry about this, and we'll actually worry about the actual table of the actual resort that is taking place. But either way, hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, make sure you guys leave a like, smash that subscribe button. Let me know in the comments below, what do you think of the simulation match, and you know, let me know in the comments below if your team were able to get a victory or unfortunately your team, of course, lost, and probably what's the biggest surprise of this weekend. I mean, as I said, I think the biggest surprise of this weekend was FC Cincinnati getting that 3-1 win against Atlanta. I definitely did not expect them to get their first win against an Atlanta team that is near the top of the Eastern Conference and actually tie with Orlando and Philly for that top spot of the Eastern Conference. But let me know in the comments below. But yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you guys next time.